Hello, welcome to the podcast about realism versus liberalism.
For this first part of the podcast, my colleague Alberto Reyes and I will explain the liberalist point of view, talk about its basic concepts, and create a general context. Afterwards, the opposite team, realism, will share their view and background. Having done that, each of us will state our points, main ideas, and defend our postures.
Liberalism is a theory of international relation, which has individual rights located at its core, free from arbitrary state power, going hand in hand with political freedom, democracy, and capitalism, as a market that best promotes welfare. These last two concepts are seen as tools of achieving peace, with a special focus on capitalism, which is seen to individualize society.
So, on the other hand, we have realism, also known as political realism, that it's a view of international politics that stress its competitive and conflictual side. It is usually contrasted with idealism or liberalism, which tends to emphasize cooperation. Realists consider the principal actors in the international arena to be states, which are concerned with their own security, act in pursuit of their own national interest, and struggle for power.
Liberalism provides a better way to rule the world. As everybody knows, the Western democratic governments are more united, and thanks to this, there is more international cooperation. Doyle states that liberal democracies are uniquely willing to eschew the use of force in their relations with one another, a view which rejects the realist contention that the anarchical nature of the international system means states are trapped in a struggle for power and security.
Rodrigo, let me tell you that if we look at all nations are all included as political entities pursuing their respective interests defined in terms of power, we are able to do justice to all of them. And we are able to do justice to all of them in a dual sense. We are able to judge other nations as we judge our own, and having judged them in this fashion, we are then capable of pursuing policies that respect the interests of other nations while protecting and promoting those of our own. Moderation in policy cannot fail to reflect the moderation of moral judgment. All nations are tempted, and few have been able to resist the temptation for long to clothe their own particular aspiration and actions in the moral purposes of the universe. According to Lord Salisbury, the only bound of union that endures among nations is the absence of all clashing interests.
Okay, but realism's approach to international politics works only to a certain degree. Focusing on personal interests rather than global values, the liberalist theory focuses on cooperation and trade. With its democratic values set to provide a peaceful world order with less incentive for war and violence, and nations and governments recognizing each other's legitimacy. Besides from these points, its focus towards globalization is what drives society, creating different economic incentives and fomenting different cultural, political, and social interactions across borders.
Okay, Rodrigo, I like your point of view, but realism shows us that globalization is not the best option. Realists mention that countries have to focus on the national interest and not to cooperate with other countries if they want to develop. On the other side, realism is more persuasive than liberalism because it has a realistic explanation of dynamics of the political world. For example, if we want to understand the conflict that's happening between two countries, we can use a realist point of view to analyze more precisely the situation and have a realistic explanation.
Okay, Santiago, I got your point. But as we explained previously, liberalism is really interested in international cooperation and a view of peaceful world. Now, liberalist thinkers said that war is unnatural, as realism said. Mueller argues that just as dueling as slavery were eventually seen as moral unacceptable, war is increasingly viewed in the developed world as repulsive, immoral, and uncivilized. And also, a lot of thinkers as Rousseau, Kant, Cobden, to Speer and Doyle, is that war were created by militarist and undemocratic governments for their own vested interests.
Okay, so thank you to you, and thanks for hearing us. We hope you enjoy our podcast and remain safe in your homes.